will be with us shortly. Fight Island is real. We are here, and the fights are coming.
Oh, my word, from top to bottom for the next 3 weeks, I think, as well. These fights are just outstanding. Of course, tomorrow night, 3 title fights. But as I said, the whole time we are here, the fights are going to be insane. So make sure you tune into every single one.
All right, so as many of our viewers know, the title fight to headline the bill was to be Kamaru Usman defending against his teammate Gilbert Burns. Burns tested positive for COVID-19, so on about a week's notice, in steps Jorge Gamebred Masvidal.
Yeah, listen, it's obviously a huge shame for Gilbert Burns, but the show must go on, and in some ways, it got better, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way to Burns, but Burns and Kamaru Usman, amazing fighters, of course, but they were teammates, so there was no bad blood. It was very cordial, and as a fight fan, it's always better when there's a little bit of bad blood, when there's beef, when there's real tension, and that's what we have here, because Jorge Masvidal is a true fighter. He'll fight anyone, anywhere, anytime. We know that. He used to try and start fights with me all the time, but now we're good friends. But he's stepping up 6 days, short notice, but he does not care.
Yeah, there is no denying there is heat on this UFC welterweight championship. It all starts with UFC 251, but we're going to be here for a couple weeks, and we will have no fewer than 4 live events. UFC 251, Usman versus Masvidal. That one's on ESPN Plus pay-per-view. The prelims at 6 p.m. Eastern right here on ESPN, as well as ESPN Plus. Wednesday night, we're right back at it, wall-to-wall on ESPN, Andy Plus. It'll be UFC Fight Night, Cater versus Ige. What a main event that could be, 10 p.m. Eastern for the main card on Wednesday. Saturday, July 18th, Flyweight Championship headlines UFC Fight Night, Figueiredo versus Benavidez 2. That title fight, though, can only be seen on Plus. Prelims will air on ESPN, and then July 25th on both ESPN and ESPN Plus. It'll be Robert Whittaker and Darren Till in a middleweight headliner. So this has got to be the fight fan's dream, right? A lot of these other professional sports are still dark. We've got 9 shows in the can and 4 more coming in the next 2 weeks.
Well, to be honest, the UFC hasn't stopped, has it really? You know, fight after fight after fight. And now here we are on Fight Island that a lot of people thought wasn't real, but it is. The fights are certainly real. Of course, tomorrow night, 3 title fights. And the quality goes the whole way through the time we're here. And then we finish with a tremendous fight. Former champion Robert Whittaker taking on Darren Till. I mean, what a way to close the show.
Absolutely incredible, all the action and all of the changes that could happen in these divisions over the next 14 days. But let's start with this championship triple header, Mike. This is only the 6th time, I should say, it's happened in UFC history. The stare downs just happened. We're ready to go, man.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, Masvidal and Usman is going to be insane. Of course, there was Dana. He was ready. He had the handout because Masvidal, great fighter, very, very unpredictable guy. You never know what's going to happen. And then in the co-main, of course, a great rematch. Max Holloway, he was the man. He ruled the division for a long time. Volkanovski came along, took the throne away. Now Max gets a chance to get his belt back. So, of course, the stakes are very, very high. And then Jose Aldo stepping down a weight division, trying to become a 2-weight division champion. Of course, the King of Rio is a legendary fighter, but he's got his hands full because, John, Petr Yan, this man is an animal inside the octagon.
He is certainly that. He has never been stopped as a mixed martial artist, and he will try to extend his overall winning streak to 10 and move to 7-0 in the UFC. All right, so here's how the 5-fight main card shakes out. You got that traditional 10 p.m. Eastern start time on ESPN Plus pay-per-view. That'll be 6 a.m. local time here in Abu Dhabi, so we're staying up all night. Good opener, though. Paige Van Zandt is back against the streaking Amanda Ribas. You got the rematch between the former strawweight queens, Andrade and Namajunas, and then it'll be all title fights the rest of the way. Jan versus Aldo, Volko versus Holloway, and the main event between Jorge Masvidal and the undisputed welterweight champ Kamaru Usman. So we mentioned not all that often in UFC history have we had this sort of embarrassment of riches with 3 title fights at the top of a card. 6th time we've had this luxury. Last time, not all that long ago, was UFC 245 last December. Who could forget 2017? I know
Me.
Michael Bisping, yeah.
Ha!
But
I don't remember much at the end of that one. Sorry, John.
Twice that year we had 3 title fights in one night. The first time we had a championship triple header was back at UFC 33 in September of 2001. Well, perhaps a win over someone with the star power of Jorge Gamebred Masvidal will result in more appreciation for Kamaru Usman because, for my money, criminally underrated, 11-0 in the UFC, and maybe this would be the signature win that takes him to that requisite next level.
Yeah, if he can go out there and beat Jorge Masvidal, come on, he has to get his respect. if you don't already respect him. I mean, look at what he's doing right here to all these fighters. Knocked out Colby Covington, destroyed Tyron Woodley from pillar to post. Every single round was a complete shutout. And this man's striking gets better all the time. Of course, he's known for his wrestling. He can take anybody down in the division. But as I said before, his last fight was a beautiful knockout against Colby Covington. And that was after he broke the man's jaw earlier in the night.
Hard to recall Kamaru Usman losing a singular round in his UFC career up until that Colby Covington fight. And when you fight this man, it is not a dream, folks. Forget trying to get on top of him and keep him there. On the feet, sound offensively and defensively, evidenced by the strike differential, tops in UFC welterweight history. Control time, largest proportionally among active UFC welterweights. And tomorrow night, he can tie the legendary George St. Pierre for consecutive welterweight wins. The other side of this equation is Jorge Gamebred Masvidal made his pro debut back in 2003. He's got the BMF title belt back in Miami, but this man craves undisputed greatness, and he has a chance tomorrow night to prove without a shadow of a doubt that he's the best welterweight in the world.
Well, he's been around since, I think it's 2003, and, you know, Usman is calling him a journeyman, which isn't really fair. He just never became the champion. But last year was really his coming out party. He started off with an electrifying knockout of Darren Till. And then in the summer, in International Fight Week, a 5-second knockout, a record-breaking knockout, 5 seconds on Ben Askren. And then he topped it off, there it is right there, to close it out against Nate Diaz, who everybody loves. Nate Diaz. He went out there, he beat Nate Diaz. The fight was stopped after 3 rounds. And now, of course, he fights for the belt. And it's the fight that the fans want to see.
Well, safe to say 2019 was a pretty good year for Team Masvidal. One of the more impressive calendar years turned in by any fighter in UFC history. Michael sort of set up some of it, but back in March, $100,000 in bonus money for a vicious knockout of Darren Till. Followed that up with the record-breaking knockout of Ben Askren. That was in July at UFC 239. And then, of course, at UFC 244, he gets the better of Nathan Diaz to win the BMF title. He was honored then by Toyo Tires as the 2019 Fighter of the Year. So now the question beckons, stylistically, strategically, what does he have for Kamaru Usman?
Well, I think on the feet, it's fair to say he's the better striker. He's faster, he's slicker, you know, he's probably got more, in fact, he has got more experience. Kamaru is the bigger guy, the stronger guy. He's going to look to get hold of him and put him on the floor. Of course, when you're on the ground, doesn't matter how good your striking is. But Jorge is, you know, he's been around for a long time, as I just said. He knows how to scramble. He can get out of the way. He's got incredibly fast footwork as well. So, even though it's 6 days' notice, I think this is a very tricky fight for Kamaru Usman. Of course, you got to favor Kamaru. He's the champion. He's the bigger guy, the stronger guy, and he's had a full training camp. But Masvidal, there's just something about this man, and certainly this new Masvidal that we're seeing over this last year. You know, this is going to be a tough one for Usman.
He has certainly changed things up in terms of prioritizing the finish, but he's about a 2-1 underdog here tomorrow night at UFC 251. All right, now it is time to hear from the undisputed UFC welterweight champion, Kamaru Usman, standing by backstage with Megan O'Leary.
Thank you so much, John. Kamaru, listen, we know you're a gamer here and you are ready for any challenge that comes, but tell me what it was like and what kind of pivoting you had to do from preparing for Gilbert Burns to having your travel delayed and now fighting Jorge Masvidal.
It was a lot of pivoting as far as mentally. That's all it was for me, because the way I fight anyways and the way that I train for each fight, I leave no stone unturned in preparing for my opponent. So it doesn't matter whether they're a wrestler, they're a grappler, they're a striker. I work on every single facet of the game to make sure I'm up to par on everything. And so it just had to be a mental switch, because I'm preparing to go in and fight a dog like Gilbert Burns. And then I get a call that, hey, that has been switched around. Now you have to fight Jorge Masvidal. So, you know, Jorge's a tough opponent. He's a big, bad opponent. He's the next guy in front of me, and I have to go in there tomorrow night and I have to take care of business.
When you assess Jorge as an opponent, I mean, what stands out for you?
Yeah, he's very tough. I mean, a guy that's been in the sport for a long, long time. Not a lot of people, especially as tough as our sport is, not a lot of people are able to withstand having so many fights and still kind of being around and hanging around that top level of competition. And so there's a reason he's been able to do that and still be here. So, you know, respect to him in that aspect. But, you know, when it comes to competing against the elite like myself, I have to go in there tomorrow night and let him know that he's still just a 500 fighter.
I know that you want to make a point. You want to win in emphatic fashion. So how do you believe you actually do that?
Man, that's up to him. you know, for a lot of my opponents, it's up to them. If they're tough enough to be able to drag it out, drag that beating out for 25 minutes, and, you know, more power to them. But I just don't. I know he's a tough opponent, but I just don't see him being able to drag it out for 25 minutes. So I think it's going to stop. I think the fight is definitely going to end within 25 minutes.
Excellent. Well, we are so looking forward to this main event. I appreciate your time. Good luck to you. Have fun out there.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. John, back to you guys.
All right, a little side-by-side career comparison on the headliners tomorrow. Masvidal's been at this a long time, turned pro back in 2003. Kamaru Usman actually won a D2 national title in wrestling in 2010 before he turned pro in MMA in 2012. Masvidal with one more UFC win than Usman, but of course Kamaru is 11-0 in the big show. Kamaru lands more strikes per minute. Masvidal would appear to be the bigger knockout threat, and in terms of the takedowns, much more a part of Usman's game than Masvidal's. All right, so there is this backdrop of bad blood. Radio Row earlier in February, Super Bowl week, they got into it, had to be separated. This seems like a legitimate rivalry, and the heat does not seem fabricated to me.
No, certainly not fabricated whatsoever. But I just think Jorge Masvidal will do this with everybody. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, there it is. We're taking a look at it earlier in the year, talking a bit of smack back and forth. And you know what, Masvidal, as I said, he does this with everybody, you know, because at the end of the day, you're going to step into an octagon and you're going to beat each other up. You're going to punch each other in the face. So, you know, he's doing what he needs to do to, you know, to get himself going, to rev up his engine, so to speak. And I was the similar way when I used to fight. You know, some people need to be like that. Usman, of course, for that, he's going to take offense. And, and from Usman's perspective, he's trying to take his belt. He's trying to take everything that Kamaru Usman has worked so hard for. So he's taking that personally as well. So now I think both guys have forgotten why they initially disliked each other. Now it's just like, I hate that guy, he's the enemy.
And Masvidal is getting the bulk of the credit for stepping up on short notice, and rightfully so. But let's also acknowledge Kamaru Usman, who was scheduled to fight his teammate, flew to Dallas, then back to Vegas, and eventually got to Fight Island. He deserves some credit as well. Here in Abu Dhabi, so last December it was UFC 245 in Las Vegas, Nevada. Max Holloway was the champion. He was trying to extend his run of all-time featherweight greatness, but as you'll see here, the challenger Alexander Volkanovski was more than ready to go right out of the chute. All right, welcome back. John Anik, Michael Bisping, now joined by Megan O'Leary. So we sat down with Alexander Volkanovski this week, and he expects, despite largely dominating the first meeting, that this fight will be of a higher pace.
Yeah, he actually thinks that Max Holloway is going to come at him and only move forward. He's going to have everything in this rematch because there's a lot on the line here for Max. But Alex, actually, I just spoke with him backstage, and he was telling me that for this one, he's done so much work with his strength and conditioning. He feels like he has so much power that he doesn't think that there is a chance he does not get a finish somewhere in that 4th or 5th round.
All right, so no carbs for Michael Bisping this week, but man, have you been eating a lot of film. Your thoughts on the first fight and how it might play into the second meeting?
Well, listen, a lot of talk has been discussed, pardon me, about the leg kicks, and they did play a massive factor. In fact, let's take a look. Volkanovski used them to such great effect, really slowed down the movement, and just chipped away throughout the whole fight. I mean, you see there the wide stance. That makes it hard for Max to move away, and it makes it hard for him to check the leg kick. So look for Max to have a different approach this time.
Yeah, in fact, Alex said, listen, with the leg kicks, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. However, I am expecting Max to have some sort of answer to those kicks, but that's not a problem. Alex believes that his biggest strength is his ability to adjust. So he believes even if Max has an answer for those kicks, it's not a problem. He has planned B, C, and D.
Yeah, well, Volkanovski, as we know, as he pushed on throughout the fight, he did continue to land the kicks. But Max, in rounds 3 and 4, I think it was, he started getting some better work, started landing some shots. We see here, wait for it, boom, big leg kick, head kick, pardon me, landed on Volkanovski, but it wasn't enough, and it was too little too late, and we had and knew.
So there were a lot of takeaways for the three of us when we did have that conversation with Alexander Volkanovski. Megan, for me, he kept talking about all of the different weapons in his arsenal that he held back because maybe Max didn't make those adjustments that forced him to reveal all of his tools.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we saw something new in his arsenal last time when he had all of those kicks that he just debilitated Max's lead leg with. But this one, you know, it's interesting. He sort of alluded to when I spoke to him about maybe grappling will come into play. Maybe he's going to catch some of Max's kicks and take this one to the canvas. That could be an interesting matchup should we see these two, you know, hit the ground at some point.
Yeah, well, if we're going to talk about pure strength, I think you've got to favour Volkanovski. The man used to be 250 pounds, something like that. Used to be a rugby player. Yeah. And he's actually hoping that Max obsesses about the leg kicks. As he said, I hope he's training nothing but defending leg kicks because I've got more than leg kicks. And when he thinks about defending them, then these come into play.
He was a hell of a rugby league player. He didn't just put on a uniform. His max weight, though, was 214 pounds, right? Which is 70 pounds or so above the featherweight limit. Everybody's saying 240,
I was a little off there as well, so
I want to
my
make
bad,
that
my
abundantly
bad.
clear. 214 pounds. The other side of this equation is Max Holloway, favored in the first meeting. He's the underdog here. He doesn't seem overly focused on making adjustments, but you got to think there's going to be more output from Max, especially early.
Well, Max, you know, his expression is always, it is what it is.
That's right.
That's kind of the way he's looking at this fight, and it's a very mature approach. You know, you can't obsess over it. Listen, there's a reason he became such a dominant featherweight champion, and the reason he defended the belt so many times. So in a certain way, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But that said, he does need to make some adjustments. He does need to block the kicks. He does need to be busier. I mean, ultimately, that's what cost him the fight. The fact that Volkanovski was busier.
Yeah, and I think, you know, when we talked to Max about this, a big lesson that he learned was he believes he won that fight, but still it was in the hands of the judges. So he knows he needs to be more active, do more, so that in the eyes of those three people who are scoring this one, he can be victorious. So it might not be that he thought he lost that fight necessarily, but the fact that he knows he has to fight a certain way so that those three judges can score it for him.
All right, let's take a look at some numbers on Max Holloway because you really can't outline the history of this featherweight division without coming across this dude's name. Every record you would want at 145 pounds he has. Most wins, most finishes, most knockouts, significant strikes landed. Tonight, of course, or tomorrow, I should say. I don't know what the hell time it is right now, but he has the chance to become a two-time champion in one of the UFC's toughest division. He has spoken a lot about some training camp limitations. I don't know how much you read into that, Michael, but seems like he didn't have all of his resources surrounding him this time around.
Well, I asked him if he was playing mind games with Volkanovski, and he swears. He says, no, I had no training partners. I had my coach over Zoom, and I said, no, DC said, Daniel Cormier said he saw somebody in the background. He's like, that's somebody that lives with me. He doesn't do jiu-jitsu or anything like that. So on paper, yes, there's limitations there, but also you got to look at it like this. As I said before, you know, he has the skills that made him a champion. He knows how to fight. He knows how to get in shape. You don't necessarily need to get in there and have combat 3 times a week. You don't need to spar endlessly. Sometimes that's detrimental. So who knows? Maybe this is a revolution in training for fights. Just do it over Zoom and shadow box.
Yeah.
I doubt it. I doubt the revolution's coming, but you never know.
He made a dummy, too.
Oh, well, there you go. Volkanovski's dead.
Fitness is a powerful thing. If you saw Bisping shadowboxing outside on his balcony here, there. So no bantamweight has a longer winning streak in the UFC right now. Knockdown rate per 15 minutes, second in this division's illustrious history. And his strike differential, total knockdowns, also top 5 in UFC bantamweight history. And man, kid's just 27 years old. And he is only just now getting going. So Michael Bisping, when Henry Cejudo surprisingly retired back in May, the bantamweight belt was thereby vacated, and the first name out of the mouth of UFC President Dana White to challenge for this vacant belt was Petr Yan. How come?
Well, I'm not surprised. Well, because, listen, if you watch that package there, I mean, it's self-evident, right? The guy is an absolute animal. He hits very, very hard. He's willing to do whatever it takes to win a fight. And his most recent victory over Uriah Faber. Uriah, who's a legend, a Hall of Famer, a man that everybody in mixed martial arts know. He was just too much every step of the way, and I think it was the 3rd round. He caught him with a head kick, and that was that. And that was his big coming out party, because by far the biggest name that on his resume, Megan.
Yeah, absolutely. A UFC Hall of Famer at that. 6 wins in about 18 months. And the thing about Petr Yan is he's from Siberia, where he said people don't just live, they only survive there. He said they don't really enjoy life, so nothing phases him inside the octagon. He gives very little away when he's standing in front of his opponents, and you can tell that the moment's never too big for him, because really, he's not thinking about all the other things surrounding the fight. He's just thinking about what's in front of him.
And he hasn't made a lot of excuses despite some health issues. I talked to his manager this morning. This is far and away the healthiest that Petr Yan has been. Now, Megan, we've spent a lot of time in Brazil, so we know they don't throw out that King of Rio designation softly. Jose Aldo in a big spot. Your thoughts on him in this matchup?
You know, I'm very interested in this fight because when we saw him dropping down to bantamweight, I think there were a lot of questions. How could he possibly make 135 after tough weight cuts at 145? Well, frankly, he said, this has rejuvenated my career and my love for the sport. I feel better than ever. Something that I find the most interesting about this matchup with Piotr Jan is the fact that Jose said, I am going back to my kickboxing. I lost it for a little while, but I'm going back to focusing on those kicks that made me such a household name, especially back in the WC where he was just devastating opponents with his kicks and with his knees.
Mike, when we've sat down with Jose Aldo when he was the featherweight champion, cutting weight, ornery, not looking great, this has been a wholesale lifestyle change. And he's a more affable guy now, despite dropping the weight. It's incredible.
It's just insane what the human body and mind is capable of. As you said, at 145, some of those weight cuts, they were pretty dangerous. But here he is at 135, making it easier than what he was at 145. Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
And even though there was a quarantine in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro, and he couldn't train as normal, you might worry about the weight and his conditioning for this fight. He actually said, I wish I could do every single camp that way.
Right.
This has been the best one of my career.
Well, if you know that gym, Nova União, it's crawling with fans and pro fighters and non-pro fighters. So Jose Aldo certainly enjoyed the extra space. All right, Megan, good stuff. You're going downstairs to corral the president. Well, voiceover there as we show you the main card for UFC 251 Championship triple header live on pay-per-view. Usman and Masvidal in the headliner. Co-main event is a featherweight championship rematch. Volkanovski and Holloway. Piotr Jan and Jose Aldo will make it so that UFC bantamweight title is no longer vacant. And then you've got the women, Andrade and Namajunas in a rematch, and Amanda Ribas versus Paige Van Zandt. All right, I'm going to take you to last May, UFC 237. Rose Namajunas was the strawweight champion. She put her belt on the line, did so on the road in Brazil, essentially in Jessica Andrade's backyard, and certainly was a climactic, if not epic, conclusion to that title fight.
Yeah, listen, Rose Namajunas started this fight looking absolutely sensational. Andrade knew what she had to do. She had to close the distance, and she did. And from here, Rose grabbed the Kimura. But you see the head position, it's on the inside. So when she lifted Rose, Rose landed on her backside. Now, let's go at it again. Andrade does the same thing, rushes forward. And here, look at the head. The head pops out. That changes everything for Rose. She hoists her up high in the air. And guess what? The backside goes up, and the head goes down. And she went out. I mean, it was tragic because that performance from Rose was beautiful. But guess what? There was no quit in Jessica Andrade, and I can't wait for the rematch.
All right, so the rematch is interesting from a betting perspective because Andrade was actually a slight favorite as the challenger. Now it's Namajunas, about a 2-1 favorite. How about some keys to the rematch from your end?
Yeah, listen, if you're Rose Namajunas, you want to use the footwork. In the first fight, she used that, and she looks absolutely sensational. And she's got to use the length, right? She's got the longer reach, and she knows how to use it. If you're Jessica Andrade, you got to close the distance, just like she did in the first one. She closed the distance, she got the clinch, and then obviously finished the fight. And for both ladies here, right, for Rose, it's avoid the clinch. For Andrade, of course, like I just said, it's a case of getting the clinch. But easier said than done.
Easier said than done is right. Well, this 115-pound division, ubiquitously regarded as the deepest among the women. I want to show you the top 5 because this is just drunk with former champions. Zhang Weili is the woman they are all chasing, but Andrade, Namajunas, and Ion Jacek have all held the belt before. You have Tatiana Suarez lurking at number 3. She is the best wrestler in this division and appears destined for greatness as well. But of course, it's all in front of Andrade and Namajunas, and it stands to reason if Andrade can beat Rose Namajunas, she might get that second crack against Zhang Weili.
Yeah, well, listen, obviously that first fight against Zhang Weili didn't go her way, but when she's on form, I mean, she's got some of the biggest power in the division, an absolutely relentless striker. She gets in her opponent's face and look, just unloads with everything she has with reckless abandon, puts together long combinations, incredibly powerful. That move she did to Rose, that wasn't the first time she does that. When she gets her opponents, she throws them around all over the place. That is what she brings to the table.
Mentally, Rose Namajunas appears to be in an outstanding place, but physically, she's got to draw a lot of confidence from her success early in that first fight.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was watching that first fight, I said to myself, I said, wow, nobody is beating Rose Namajunas anytime soon. The footwork was sublime. It was absolutely perfect. She was fighting the perfect fight. Of course, it didn't end that way, but I think the bookies, they're looking at this and they're thinking, wow, look at that. She looked so good in that first fight. She's going to have the same kind of performance, but just not get slammed on her head unconscious.
It was interesting because she said to us on our Fighters Zoom meeting the other day that I need to protect myself because if that happened in the street, it might have been fatal. I thought she was a quote machine yesterday.
Yeah. I mean, that is an interesting quote. And for sure, if your head hits concrete
right.
like that, it certainly lights out. Fortunately, we've got a nice padded canvas. We've got a nice padded octagon. And actually, I don't think you're supposed to spike somebody on the head, but just given the circumstances, that's the way it went down.
Right.
But yeah, listen, Rose is very, she's kind of she's very calm, a unique individual, pardon me. She's very calm, she's very composed. She's talking about growing vegetables and being the world's best farmer.
Yeah.
But listen, let me tell you, she's one of the world's best strikers. Simple as that.
And Zhang Weili, the champion in this division, believes that Rose is the most credentialed martial artist of that group that we just showed you. So we'll see how it goes for Namajunas and if she might be next for Zhang Weili. Amanda Ribas is another fighter that figures to factor into that equation. She will move up, though, to flyweight, albeit temporarily, as she takes on the returning Paige Van Zandt.
Yeah, Paige Van Zandt, she's been out for a while. She broke her arm, but she had some fantastic performances. She's coming back after about 18 months, I think it is. But you got to be careful what you wish for in the UFC because Amanda Ribas, this woman, she's a high-level grappler in judo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And on the feet, she's got tremendous boxing, very, very fast combinations, good straight shots. But of course, Paige Van Zandt, she's been known to fight through wars. She smiles when her face is covered in blood. And she actually said that's what she's looking for. She wants a war.
All right, so that's the picture on the pay-per-view, but good news because prior to the pay-per-view, we will have no fewer than 8 prelims. Those can all be seen live on both ESPN Plus and right here on ESPN. A couple of highlights, top of your screen. Volkan Oezdemir taking on the UFC newcomer that everybody is talking about from the Czech Republic, Yuri Prochazka, and then Eliseo Zaleski dos Santos at welterweight taking on the king of Kung Fu, Muslim Salikov. Well, as is the case during any fight week, it has been a busy one for the UFC president, Dana White, and he is now standing by backstage with Megan O'Leary. Megan.
Thank you so much, John. Dana. Okay, some main event magic happened here. Gilbert Burns fell off the card, and then Jorge Masvidal was in. What did it take to make this happen and have all sides come together and be on the same page?
Well, I think that Gilbert falling out gave Masvidal the opportunity, and, I think it was brilliant of him to slide into this spot and take the fight the way that he did, and we got it done. There's no real magic to it. I think it was brilliant on his part.
All right, so what do you like about this main event now, Kamaru versus Jorge?
This is the fight that the people wanted to see. This is the fight that everybody wanted. It came together, and the buzz is massive. The pre-everything for this thing is massive. It's hard to describe to you how off the charts this entire weekend is. So it's already been successful in every way it could possibly be successful.
Like you said, a massive main event, but there's 2 other title fights on the card. We have a rematch between Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski. This is a really intriguing fight. I mean, Max was a longtime featherweight champion. Alex came in there, took the belt away. I mean, what are you looking forward to in this rematch?
Yeah, I expect it to be the same type of fight as the first fight. I think it's going to be a tough fight. And, who knows if somebody can pull off a finish. You never know if that's going to happen. If it goes to the scorecards, it's probably going to be a close decision.
Yeah, that was a great first fight. Looking forward to the second one. And then the vacant bantamweight title, that is on the line between Peter Yan and Jose Aldo. I mean, Jose Aldo was a long reigning champion, and Peter Yan is just kind of, came out 18 months ago onto the scene and has just dominated. When you look at this matchup, what are your expectations for the fight?
Fireworks for that fight. I think that fight is going to be fast, explosive, and I don't see that going to the distance. I don't see that one going the distance.
Interesting. Okay, we'll see what happens with that. And finally, one other fight I want to touch upon is also a rematch, Rose Namajunas and Jessica Andrade. I mean, me personally, I'm so excited for this one. I see a little smile on your face when I mentioned it. I mean, what are your thoughts?
It's an incredible fight. First of all, we know how popular the women's fights are. This fight is legit. A really good fight. The first fight was awesome. Rose came out and put on a clinic in the first round. Jessica, famous dropper on her head slam that finished the fight. I'm curious to see how Rose comes out in this fight. I think when she gets in there and fly, she's mentally stronger than she puts off leading into fights.
Yeah, one of the very best. And quickly, I just want to touch upon Fight Island. I mean, we got it done. We're here. We're about to have our first event. You've got to be excited.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I mean, nobody does it like these guys do. I mean, you're here, you see it, you walk around. First of all, there's been 8,000 tests leading into this weekend. 8,000 tests leading into this weekend. There's no other thing on earth going on like this. The type of testing that's going on. People have been flown in from 5 hubs from all over the world: Moscow, 2 from Vegas, 1 from London, 1 from Brazil. You know, it all came